Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Namaste. Welcome to the 20th session of our course Yoga and Positive Psychology for Managing Career and Life. Today we are going to discuss yogic interventions for making mind a friend. Some of you might be wondering why this is topic mind as a friend, because this is my mind and it is supposed to work for me, and if it is supposed to work for me, naturally it is bound to be my friend, but that is not the case. We looked at what are the causes of the emotional issues, problems and challenges, and if you recall, these are about fearfulness, anxiety, dependence and sentimentality. You may also recall that we examined these ailments, we examined these sources of emotional distress, and what we found was that fearfulness is nothing but excessive concern, anxiety is nothing but excessive alertness and excessive attachment with the outcome of my efforts. Dependence is excessive trust, and aversion and attachment more sentimentality. So, all these major sources of distress are actually started with the mental or emotional faculty which are useful. All these have some evolutionary significance, but when these faculties are overused, they turn into the source of emotional distress. So, a friendly mind is the productive and functional mind, but the same mind can be dysfunctional, and the reason for dysfunctionality is that my mind probably has started working against me. It has become an obstacle in delivering my role. It has become obstacle in me experiencing well-being. It has become an obstacle in delivering my duties and my disposition. Title of the session is Mind as a Friend, and how yogic interventions can help us making my mind as a friend. In order to understand mind, we may look at a basic biological feature of our mind or our brain. We discussed in the earlier session that mind is not limited to brain. So, we are not going to repeat that, but brain is a very significant expression of mind, or you can say seat of mind. Brain has three major parts: reptilian complex, limbic system and neocortex. Reptilian complex is mostly related to the survival and reproduction. Limbic system emerged first time in the primitive mammalians, and that is the center for emotions, empathy, parental care, parental role, and that is the significant feature of the human brain. All three parts of the brain have different roles to play. Reptilian brain is related more to instincts, dominance, survival, and this is that part of the brain which gives a sense of territory. What is my territory? What is your territory? What is my boundary? Where my ownership exists? From where your ownership starts? So, that is the reptilian brain's job. Mammal's brain job is nurturing and experiencing feelings and emotions, and that is the seat of maintaining relationships. It is the mammal brain which is the basis of parental care, relationship with the kids and kins, which eventually result into formation of community. Human brain, as I told, is the newest part, neo-mammalian brain, neocortex as it is called, that is the center for language, ideas, concepts, artistic vision, etc. So, this is the newest part, and that is the center where most of the executive functions or most of the complex cognitive activities take place. So, if we explain function of yoga from the perspective of these three brains, these three parts of the brain, channelize the power is emerging from the reptilian brain and mammal brain and help the human brain to take charge of things. Please remember the Kathopanishad, the allegory of chariot about human self. So, man is the rein, senses are the horses, charioteer, one who holds the rein is the intellect and that controls it, and the direction of the chariot is given by the self, the Atman, which is the true owner of the chariot. So, yoga help us to keep the human brain as in charge of our activities. How it does that? In a simple terms, how it does that? Limbs of yoga, and we can reflect on our previous conversations, how these different limbs help us in managing our emotions and managing our intellect. In that way, they govern our behavior as well. Yam, which are Satya, Ahimsa, Asteya, Brahmacharya, Aparigraha, these set the boundary conditions. These yamas are the basic rules or principles on which community or existence operates. If entities, living entities stop following these niyamas, there will not be order in community, family or in nature. That is why Patanjali Maharshi call these yamas as Mahavratas, the obligations or duties which are to be followed in all stages and all conditions of life. These yamas help us to align ourselves with the community or with the nature, and these set the boundary condition. In that way, they manage our emotions, because once the boundary conditions are set, naturally our emotions are channelized. Niyamas, which are Shauch, Santosh, Swadhyay, Ishwar Pranidhan, they maintain and cleanse our inner conditions. Shauch is related to the external cleansing as well. Otherwise, Swadhyay, Santosh, Ishwar Pranidhan, these are all related to managing our mind and managing and controlling our mind and maintaining the inner interiority in such a way where our mind can be directed towards functional and harmonious objectives. Asanas, we discussed asanas in great detail, and we also looked at asanas as psychosomatic interventions, because when we perform asanas, it is not only useful, it is not only very good for our physical self, not only useful for our body to remain flexible, it also helps our mind to maintain itself better. It also generates a kind of a pleasantness in our mind. And how it does that? It does that by bringing coherence in the brain waves, by lowering the stress hormones and releasing the happy hormones. Then comes pranayam, rhythmic breathing, and different types of pranayams we discussed in the previous session, and its unique property. Breath is by definition a voluntary activity, but we cannot live without it. So, breath controls and connects our sympathetic and parasympathetic system. It connects our interiority with exteriority. So, by managing our breath as it is done in pranayam, we can experience the relaxation and we can regulate our mind. Pratyahar, that is a sense withdrawal. Prati ahar means instead of enjoying our senses through the outside goods and things, reflecting back our senses towards interiority, and that is like stepping back purposefully, and that helps us to maintain a limited stimulants, that helps us to maintain a limited exposure to the stimulants and uniform exposure to the stimulants, and that brings calmness and equanimity of mind. Dharana, that is one pointedness, that is the source of self mastery. When I am able to remain focused on my dharma, when I am able to remain focused on the thought, I am able to perform my dharma, or I am able to create, which is the potential of the thought. So, dharana brings a kind of purposefulness to our mind, to our personality, and purposefulness is extremely important for our mind to get managed. The most harmful thing we can do to our mind, which in turn be harmful to our overall self, is not remaining focused. Obviously, the most helpful thing to manage our mind is to identify the purpose and remaining focused on that. Then comes dhyan, quietening of mind. In the quietude of mind, great things emerge. So, that is the space of intelligence, that is the source of intelligence, and samadhi is the source of bliss, that is about transcending emotions and individualized cognition. Cognition happens in the state of samadhi, but that is not individualized, that is not limited to my individual identity, it is of different kind of cognition, and that becomes the source of bliss and transcendence. So, you can see that all limbs of yoga help us to manage emotional balance and manage our mind. The question is how mind actually gets entangled, and what is the ideal state of mind. These answers are given in the second chapter of Yoga Sutra. It says that Swaswami Shaktyo Yoga, the union of the Purusha and Prakriti, the constant integrated awareness, that is Purusha, and Prakriti, which is the manifestation, that which is made up of guna and dosha, when the combination and merging of identity happens of Purusha and Prakriti, that is the cause, that causes the realization of nature, that causes the self awareness, and from there itself avidya emerges. Tasya hetur vidya, ignorance is in the cause of this association, this union. What happens in that association? We remain deeply identified with this association. We remain deeply identified with the Prakriti, with our gunas and doshas. We do not identify ourselves with the Purusha. So, tat abhavat sanyoga, abhava hanam tad drashe kaivalyam. That means, the ceasing of that union is the ideal condition, han, that is the ideal condition. So, there being absence of ignorance, there is absence of union, and which is the thing to be avoided. That is the state of the liberation of the seer. So, han, which is adarsh sthiti, ideal state. What is that ideal state? That is a ceasing of the connection, a unconscious union of Prakriti and Purusha. When the Han is achieved in the Adarsh sthiti, in the ideal state, Viveka Khyati. How that Han is achieved? What is the way of achieving that ideal state? The way of attaining ideal state is Viveka Khyati, clear and distinct discriminative knowledge which can distinguish Prakriti and Purusha. That is Viveka Khyati, and that is called Hanopaya. Upaya means way, Han is Adarsh or ideal, way of achieving ideal according to Yoga Sutra is Viveka Khyati. And what happens in the Viveka Khyati? What are the sign of attainment of Viveka Khyati? That sign is Saptadha Pranta Bhumi Pragya, the wisdom of 7 types. We are going to look at what are those 7 types of wisdom. Viveka Khyati is achieved. This is reflected in attainment of the 7 types of wisdom. The yogi who has acquired discriminative enlightenment, knowledge is of the 7-fold highest ground. Pranta Bhumi is the ground, Pragya meaning wisdom, Saptadha means 7 types, Tasya is his. So, when the Hanopaya happens, Viveka Khyati is achieved, 7 types of wisdom arise, and that can happen by following 8 limbs of yoga. Yoganga anushtanat ashuddhi chaye jnana deepti aviveka khyate. By practice of the limbs of yoga, the impurities being destroyed, knowledge becomes engulfed up to discrimination. That is the translation we have taken from the book of Bihar School of Yoga, Munger. Most of the translation are actually taken from the books of the Bihar School of Yoga as located in Munger. What are those 7 types of wisdom? First type of wisdom is realization of what is to be avoided, that is called He Shunya state. Second type of wisdom is awareness of the means for the removal of the suffering, that is He Hetu Kshina state. Third state is awareness of spiritual evolution, that is Prapya Prapt state. Fourth type of pragya or fourth state of pragya is awareness of fulfillment and accomplishment, that is Chikirarsha Shunya state. Fifth type of wisdom is awareness of the purpose of experience and liberation, that is called Chitta Sattva Kritarshasthatha. The sixth is Guna Leenata, that is means dissolving of the gunas, awareness of the fulfillment of the work of gunas. So, you are not entangled, you are not engulfed or enslaved of gunas. And seventh is awareness of one's own self, Atmasthiti. That is in the Vedantic tradition called Brahmagyan, in the Sankhya tradition it is called Kaivalya, in the Bhakti tradition it is called Mukti or living with your deity. Different traditions call this state in different terms, and pathways of achieving those states are also different. In yoga we call it Kaivalya, and that is in the Veda Bhashya of Patanjali Yoga Sutra is called Atmasthiti. These are the 7 types of wisdom. These wisdom are available to us. We all have all of these in some degree. So, it is not about presence or absence of these wisdom. These are there in all of us in some degree. When we are able to use these more often, when we are able to operate mostly on these wisdom, then we can say that we have come to the maturity of these wisdom. For example, realization of what is to be avoided, that is related to how much food we should eat, how much sense indulgence we should allow ourselves, where we need to put in effort, what we should avoid in our behavior, all that is he shunya state. We all have there in us to some degree. Awareness of the means of removal, how I can get rid of my suffering, how I can get rid of my dysfunctionality. All of us have some idea, some notion, some insight how I can become more functional, how I can become more wise, how I can become more intelligent, how I can become more productive. We all know to at least to some degree about it. So, that is hetu chin state, how I can get rid of my dysfunctionality. We all have that to some degree. Awareness of spiritual evolution, what can make me the best version of myself, what is the most meaningful thing to me, what can make me very productive executive, excellent human being or a member of community. We all have some idea about it. So, we also have prapta state. So, that is also there in some degrees. As we go along, fourth is the achievement and accomplishment. If you see the definition of flourishing, that is reflected in the acronym PARMA, that is positive emotion, positive achievement, positive relationships. In the PARMA, which is the reflection of flourishing, and we have talked about it in the earlier sessions, there is a component called sense of positive achievement. What can give me sense of fulfillment? In the Maslow's need hierarchy, it is related to actualization. So, we all have some element, some degree of actualization there. We all know what gives us deepest fulfillment, what gives us sense of positive, most meaningful accomplishment. So, we all know that at least to some degree. So, we all have these wisdoms with us. With the practice of yoga, we can bring clarity and we get the energy and power to operate on this wisdom. In the yogic tradition and other traditions as well, we talk about three types of Shakti, Ichha Shakti, Jnana Shakti and Kriya Shakti. Ichha Shakti is power of will, how much I have that willingness to do or accomplish or to engage myself for the positive efforts in life, that is Ichha Shakti. Second is Jnana Shakti, how much I know about it. We discussed Tattvava Bodh in the previous sessions, that is Jnana Shakti, knowing about what is worth accomplishing, what is worth pursuing, that is Jnana Shakti. And Kriya Shakti is actually applying that in my behavior, in my transactions, in the day to day life, that is Kriya Shakti. Most of us have Ichha Shakti, some of us have more Jnana Shakti. What distinguishes more successful from the average successful or less successful people is Kriya Shakti. Those who are able to implement, those who are able to do according to their Ichha Shakti and Jnana Shakti, they become most successful. In the wisdom also this logic applies. Those who have this wisdom only at cognitive level, they will operate with certain level of functionality, they will operate at certain level of productivity, but those who constantly work on refining this wisdom and apply that wisdom in their behavior and in their transactions, they can become more successful, they can become more joyful in their life. When my mind is interaction in terms of its social interaction, so that is reflected in the 33rd sutra of Yoga Sutra, which says that Maitri Karuna Mudita Pekshanam Sukha Dukha Punya Punya Vishyanam Bhavanatta Chitta Prasadanam. In relation to happiness, misery, virtue and vice, that means the interaction with the people who have experience of happiness, misery, virtue and vice, by cultivating attitudes friendliness, compassion, gladness and indifference respectively, the mind becomes purified and peaceful. A yogi is the one who operates from the space of friendliness with the happy people. When they look happiness around themselves, they do not feel jealousy, they do not feel inferiority, they become friendly with the happiness when they see around that. People who are miserable, they do not develop an aversion towards them. Instead of that, they develop compassion towards them, and that arises from the reflection that when I have pain, when I have misery, how do I feel? Similarly, that person also might be feeling, and that reflection result into emergence of empathy and then compassion. Similarly, when yogis see a virtuous person or a talented person, when they look at talent around them, they do not develop irsha, they do not develop jealousy, they do not try to impose negativity in the virtues. Instead of that, they enjoy seeing the talent, they appreciate the talent, and that is that what we call mudita, the great quality of mudita, which is gladness towards virtues and talent. And when they come across vice, human weaknesses, they do not have a great animosity, they try to avoid that. Not that yogi try to avoid the vice when they look around vice, but it is more like what Jesus Christ said, and Mahatma Gandhi also said it, said and wrote about it many times. Don't have dislike to your enemy, but you have to have dislike to the wrong things it is doing. So, in the same way, yogi develop a kind of upeksha at the personal level, but also does whatever is required to establish or follow dharma when they see vices or human weaknesses around themselves. Let us look at what are the mechanisms which are studied in the modern psychology, which connect yoga and help us to balance emotions and cognition. Many of these are connectors of positive psychology and yoga. Since this is 20th session, this is the appropriate time we can look at what are the modern constructs which connect positive psychology and yoga. We are also going to look at the various research studies which are conducted by our team in IIT Bombay to examine these connections. So, the mechanism which connect yoga and help us in gaining balance in emotions and cognitions are mindfulness, interoception, distancing, centering, subjective vitality, self-regulation, self-efficacy, creative problem solving, emotional intelligence, empathy, compassion, broadening of the perspective, emotional intelligence, egocentric bias, it means reducing the egocentric bias, attention, memory, executive function, processing speed, general cognition, self transcendence and many more others like cognitive flexibility, like emotional connection, etc., etc. So, you can see many psychological constructs which are studied in the current times are inculcated with the practice of yoga, and these are the mediating factors which help yoga to make our mind friendly towards ourselves and towards the world around. We will look at these construct one by one, and then we will look at the general mechanism through which these constructs or these variables affect different aspects of the psychological health, like moral reasoning or psychological capital, etc. Mindfulness, that is the first thing. Mindfulness is a open unbiased awareness of and attention to the inner experience and manifest actions, our ability to observe ourselves, that is mindful awareness. Mindful metacognition is our ability to look at the wider pattern. Mindful observation, this is the third aspect of mindfulness, that is our ability to observe what is happening in my body, in my mind. That is the very important factor, that is the excellent outcome of yoga based practices, which result into making our mind friendly. Interoception. Interoception is the examination of one's conscious thoughts and feelings. Interoception means I am intelligent not only to the external perceptions, I am also aware, I am also able to make sense of the intrinsic perception, that is the inner senses. My ability to observe and being aware of that is interoception, and in that way it is of different direction of perception. Distancing is another mechanism, that is response, our ability to reflect back, surveying the environment and reflecting on the course of action. Instead of being dominated by immediate stimulus, we keep bombarded with the stimulus, some are pleasant, some are unpleasant. Not operating immediately after getting stimulus, but our ability to process the information, surveying the environment and then choosing the most appropriate action, that is distancing. Self-regulation. Self-regulation is efforts one expands to monitor. Self-regulation is also reflected in willpower and motivation to manage and modulate one's emerging impulses and responses in order to pursue and maintain absolute goals. So, self-regulation is regulating ourself, and self is not only in terms of our mind, our cognition, it is also about our emotions, it is also about our behavior. Subjective vitality, that is the first, many people have reported that the first experience of performing and practicing yoga is subjective vitality, that is expression of energetic arousal, a sense of positive energy. It is defined as having a physical and mental energy that generates a sense of enthusiasm, aliveness, efficacy and energy available to the self. Next factor, which is generated with the practice of yoga and it is very much part of the positive psychology, is centering. Centering is the technique whose aim is to increase and focus attention and energy to provide relief from stress and anxiety or both. In our day to day life, we keep getting exposed to the unpleasant stimulus or interactions which we are not able to enjoy, which we are not able to appreciate, and because of that stress and anxiety emanate. On the face of that, in that situation, our ability to practice pratyahar, our ability to bring our senses more inward and focusing or directing our attention to the most valued goals and our objectives at time, that is the process called centering, and that is facilitated, that is generated, that capability is generated with the practice of yoga. Self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is my confidence about my capability for doing what I consider is important and valuable in my life. When beset by problems and adversity, our ability of sustaining and bouncing back and even beyond to attain success, that is self efficacy. Creative thinking, we all have some experience of creative thinking. It is a comprehensive cognitive and affective system. It is as much cognitive as it is emotional. Creative thinking is built on our natural creative processes that deliberately ignites and generates creative solutions and changes. That is also nurtured with the practice of yoga. Broadening of the perspective, that means broadening the comprehension of the organization, increasing the comprehension of the organization of which we are part of, increasing the comprehension and increasing our ability to perceive a broader form of system. We all are part of some system, all the systems are part of the bigger system. When we lose out on our perspective about the bigger system of which we are part of, we start operating from our limited self interest, and because of that many a time we feel agitated and anxious when we are not able to get what we expect to get out of any situation. In that situation, we need to look at the broader system. We need to be able to see how the bigger system operates, of which I am part of. In that process, we can either strategize better or we can recognize the limitation of what I can expect and what I should not expect, what kind of outcome I should seek or pursue, or what kind of item we should not seek or pursue. So, this is the broadening of the perspective, and that is also attained with the practice of yoga, and we are going to look at some of the research studies which have beautifully demonstrate how yoga helps us in broadening the perspective. Then comes perception of emotion, the capacity to recognize emotions. What am I feeling? Not only what I am feeling, but what others might be feeling or what others are feeling, that capacity also is enhanced with the yogic practice. Emotional facilitation of thought, we can appropriately use the power of emotion. This aspect is about that. We can choose the appropriate emotion which can direct our cognitive ability towards valued goals. That is the faculty called emotional facilitation of thought. Understanding emotion, that is deeply that is closely related ability to comprehend emotional information and how emotions consolidate and advance through the relationship alterations. Managing emotion, very important aspect of emotional intelligence, and we all know that emotional intelligence is one of the key capability to be success in the personal and professional life. Managing emotion is our ability to be exposed to emotions and yet directing them in oneself as well as other people. Our ability to use the emotion for the positive goals, that is managing emotions. Yogic practices also help in reducing egocentric bias. Why we have to reduce egocentric bias? Because higher egocentric bias will be a great obstacle in experiencing all those factors we have been discussing thus far: centering, mindfulness, self regulation, all those factors which we have discussed in the previous 2-3 slides. Our ability to experience those, our ability to utilize those is diminished with the high egocentric bias. Egocentric bias is a form of self-serving cognitive process that prevents individuals from looking beyond their immediate personal benefits and losses. Compassion, that is the another aspect of the yogic practices, that is another capability we develop with the yogic practices. Compassion is an attitude towards others, either close others or even strangers or to all humanity, containing feeling, cognitions and behavior that are focused on caring, concern, tenderness and orientation towards supporting, helping and understanding others. Compassion is ability to experience, ability to reflect on what others might be feeling. If the others are suffering, compassion also helps in acting to remove their suffering, to relieve them from their suffering. Self transcendence, that is another great human capability. Self transcendence encompasses the psychological states of experiencing oneself, relating to others, having a sense of meaning and acceptance, decreased self salience or increased connectedness. That the most important terms in this definition is decreased self saliency and increasing connectedness. When my identity is less limited to my physical boundary, my the boundary of my immediate relationships, but my ability to cognitively and experientially connected to the bigger system, it is more than cognition, that is called self transcendence. This is a feeling of union with higher power, nature or the whole cosmos. So, these are some of the factors which are the result of yogic practices, all the practices we discussed in the previous session, and these factors help our mind to remain friendly to ourselves and to the world. Now, we will look at some of the research studies conducted by our team in IIT Bombay to study how these factors affect the positive outcomes. So, this study is about looking at the mindfulness aspect of yoga and how it increases moral reasoning. Moral reasoning is the basic reasoning behind any action, and moral reasoning operates at 6 levels. All levels can be legitimate, but higher levels of moral reasoning make person more functional and more joyful and more valuing a member of the community or family. Moral reasoning, the lowest level is doing something to avoid harm. Next to that is doing something to seek pleasure. Third level is doing something according to the group norms. Fourth level is choosing our action based on law of the land. Fifth level is choosing our action or thinking about or deciding on our action which are related to some of the universal values of truth, beauty and goodness. Sixth or highest level of moral reasoning is having a universal perspective or vantage point of thinking or doing anything. That means before entertaining any thought or choosing any action, I reflect on whether everybody in this world start doing this in this situation, in the kind of a particular situation I am in, will world be a better place or not. So, there are 6 levels of moral reasoning. Higher the level, more inclusive decision making happens, more or better stakeholder management happens. Our ability to manage planet, people and profit in business at the same time is also enhanced. So, higher moral reasoning has lot of great positive impact at the individual and the collective life. We found that with the practice of yoga, a level of moral reasoning increases, and that happens by decreasing egocentric bias and enhancing compassion. Next study, we call it, can yoga make us hero? Hero is as a term used for the specific purpose or in a specific way. It is actually an acronym. HERO is acronym of hope, efficacy, optimism and resilience, and these 4 variables constitute psychological capital. Psychological capital is a very important factor of positive psychology studied in the current times, and psychological capital is particularly relevant at workplace. Psychological capital is found to be positively associated with the decision making, creativity, our ability to solve problems, to be a more value adding member to the team. So, lot of positive impact are being found to be emanating from the psychological capital. So, it is very important to enhance our psychological capital. Yoga based practices enhance our psychological capital. That happens by increasing our ego, our self transcendence and increasing our subjective vitality. And psychological capital, when it is enhanced, it is also reflected in the helpful or altruistic behavior. So, that also we examined and we found that yoga based practices enhance psych-cap by enhancing self transcendence, subjective vitality, and it is reflected in the altruistic behavior. In fact, in the same study we found that it is also reflected in the academic grades. Those who were practicing yoga, they scored at least 7% better grades than their peers who were not practicing yoga. Another study, we looked at yoga based practices on the engagement in the program. Engagement in MBA program or at workplace, it happens at the physical, emotional and intellectual level. Actually, this study started with our observation that as the semester progresses, students' engagement come down. Our hypothesis was that engagement level come down because of the energy dissipation, and energy dissipation happens because MBA students have to spend their energies in many directions, on placement, on academic output, on assignments, on the live projects, etc. So, some people develop this tendency to multitask, they want to do multiple things at the same time. We examined and found that those who practice yoga, they have lesser tendency to do multitasking. As a result of that, they finish one task and then they move to the next task. Yoga based practices help them to efficiently move from one task to the next. This prevents their energy dissipation. If that energy dissipation is prevented, their engagement do not drop. We did not find that engagement increasing, but engagement did not drop as their energy dissipation was prevented by less of multitasking. Interesting finding is that even if people have higher cognitive abilities, if they are not practicing yoga, they end up doing multitasking and end up spending more energy and end up experiencing reduced engagement. But even comparatively, you have lesser cognitive abilities. If you perform yoga, your energy dissipation is prevented and the decline in engagement is also prevented. So, this is a finding that was published in the Journal of Management. Another aspect of managing mind is Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga means performing our action, our day to day action as it becomes a yoga. It is an intelligent way of performing action which will leave behind no psychological traces and it facilitates self transcendence. There are 5 components of Karma Yoga. Manonigra means control of senses, Samabuddhi is equanimity of mind, Falasha Tyak, not to attach to the outcome. When we perform our action, we must identify the objective, we must work according to or for some, we must identify an objective for performing any task, but we also need to recognize that attainment of the objective is not only dependent on my effort, it is dependent on many other factors. So, even if I do not achieve the desirable outcome, I do not feel disappointed. I must keep putting in effort to attain the desirable or the dharmic or the positive objectives. That is Falasha Tyag. Swadharma is performing work according to our aptitude and according to our nature. Swadharma is when we perform something and lose track of time. Swadharma is when we naturally disposed to perform certain type of work, or we are naturally disposed to demonstrate certain type of intelligence. There are 8 type of intelligence, psychomotor intelligence, our ability to work with our body and mind coordination, musical intelligence, logical intelligence, intrapersonal intelligence, interpersonal intelligence, etc. Gardner has given that classification. So, we need to look at those 8 types of intelligence and identify which are the intelligence I naturally demonstrate. That is Swadharma, but that is not the complete Karma Yoga. Offering that Swadharma for the world maintenance, offering this my Swadharma or my aptitude to enhance harmony in the social and natural environment, that is called Lokasangraha. So, these are the 5 variables we identified, and the scale was developed by Ajinkya Navre and Ashish Pandey. We found that when we are performing yoga, it has positive impact on thriving. Thriving is a psychological state in which individuals experience sense of vitality as well as learning. Karma Yoga also is found to be positively associated with the psychological capital. We just discussed the psychological capital in this session, and we have discussed it in the earlier session as well. It prevents burnout as well. So, with the performance of Karma Yoga, we do not experience burnout at work. So, these are some of the things which are natural outcome of yoga based practices. Work is deeply connected with our identity. Work constitutes a great deal towards our well-being, and our mind is deeply engaged in our work. So, Karma Yoga is the way to perform action which can keep our mind joyful, and that is reflected in thriving and psychological capital, and that prevents burnout. So, in this session we looked at what are the different psychological mechanism through which mind is regulated, through which mind can remain friendly to ourselves and to the world, which do not result into the emotional distress. You remember in the very beginning of the session we said that our useful alertness, focused on the objective, or trusting, all these are useful things, but overuse of these capabilities or dispositions result into emotional distress. Mindfulness, self-regulation, subjective vitality, centering, distancing, many mechanisms we discussed in this session. They help to prevent my emotions and cognition to get dysfunctional, and in this way mind can remain friendly to us and to the world.